I do hope the Ukrainians do wake up and see Trump for who he really is, someone who can't be relied upon. And I've also written now a couple of times on my World Briefing newsletter that, maybe it's a good time for Mr. Zelensky to give a call to Beijing and start talks with them again, because where do all these lines intersect? Iran, North Korea, Russia. They all go through Beijing.
Evan, Ukraine is expanding its campaign of long-range strikes inside Russia, targeting warehouses belonging to the country's largest online retailer, Wildberries. Kyiv says the site is supporting Russia's war effort and wants to bring the conflict closer to everyday life for ordinary Russians, while the Kremlin has condemned the attacks as terrorism. Joining us now is Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, Michael Bociurkiw, to discuss what this new strategy could mean for the course of the war. Michael, morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be back with you guys again.
Yeah, it's great to speak to you. Is this a significant shift then? Because Wildberries, as I understand, is kind of like the Russian Amazon.
Yeah, it is, and there's been no let-up in recent days. It's gotten to the fact where Ukraine has struck so many Wildberries warehouses and logistics facilities that the company is talking about offshoring some of its operation to perhaps Kazakhstan or a neighboring country, and also a lot of small and medium-sized businesses in Russia do depend on Wildberries, like they do in Amazon in the United States, to distribute their stuff. And now there's talk of those guys doing their own independent operations. So it's really caused a lot of disruption. And this is part of course, the Ukrainian strategy to bring the war to the doorsteps for ordinary Russians. Now, got to be said though, the Russians are retaliating, and not only with drones and missiles, but they've also started striking something here called Rozetka, which is the Ukrainian version of Amazon, their warehouses as well. So it's really become almost a tit for tat in that sphere of operations.
Is it ethical for Ukraine? I mean, you might say that war's a war and you've got to do whatever you can, but there was always a distinction that Ukraine seemed to be going after military targets and Russians were the ones going after commercial targets, and then specifically residential targets going after people, which is where they've rightly received so much opprobrium. But is it okay for Ukraine to go after commercial enterprises?
Well, it's anytime a belligerent strikes a commercial, or rather a civilian target, that can be defined as a war crime. So that is a line which Ukraine seemed to have quietly crossed a few weeks ago. I can't say it's caused a heck of a lot of discussion or concern here. Yeah. However, if a missile goes off track or something like that and strikes a residential building, it could be quite bad. But, I gotta say, being based here as long as I have, every time Ukraine does a massive strike on Russia, you kind of sit here with a lot of anxiety, because Russia does hit back. And don't forget, it has a lot more resources, including help from Iran, North Korea, and in the background, China.
Donald Trump's floundering over Iran this week, as indeed last week in the preceding several months. But Zelensky's meeting Trump this week. Trump was once seen as key to a figure in the path to some sort of peace for Ukraine. Is that still the case, or is it no longer that important?
Well, there's a rumor going around that Zelensky's going to stock up on tacos before he goes to Washington again. Trump always chickens out, as we've seen happen just in the past 24 to 48 hours with Iran threatening to strike it. And then guess what? Somebody whispers into his ear, either Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia or Benjamin Netanyahu, and then there's a change of plan. Look, Donald Trump, one has to understand, is not a military strategist. He is a public relations strategist, and that's what guides him. It's whatever someone whispered into his ear the last, or whatever he thinks will raise his very desperate poll ratings at the moment. But, I do hope the Ukrainians do wake up and see Trump for who he really is, someone who can't be relied upon. And I've also written now a couple of times on my World Briefing newsletter that, maybe it's a good time for Mr. Zelensky to give a call to Beijing and start talks with them again, because where do all these lines intersect? Iran, North Korea, Russia. They all go through Beijing. These are all allies of Beijing. And there's one thing that Xi Jinping of China does not want is for Russia or Iran to become a failed state. So if you leverage that kind of thinking and say, well, maybe he does have an interest to end this war, he does have all of these guys on speed dial.
That's really interesting, Michael. As ever with you, we always have something to think of. Thanks for joining us.
Most welcome. Thank you.
That's Michael Bociurkiw there, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. He's based in Odessa.